Tonight, we take a look at the biggest red flags that popped up while the company looked the other way.
And we'll see how tense the situation got as one worker pushed his bosses to pay attention to those warnings. King 5 Susannah Frame is here with more on her investigation, Hanford's dirty secrets.
Well, Dennis and Lori, we've heard about other leaking tanks, so why is this one so important? This tank is holding waste that is so toxic that if it were to eat through its outer shell and reach the nearby Columbia River, it would contaminate irrigation water, crops, salmon, our food chain, not for months, but for hundreds of years to come. This is one spot at Hanford the public is never allowed to go. Underfoot, the most hazardous material on Earth is brewing inside a 1 million-gallon double-shell tank.
This tank is holding the nastiest of nasty stuff at Hanford.
A year and a half ago, Mike Geffrey, who works for a Hanford contractor, saw what no one expected. Evidence that tank was leaking. If so, it would be the first double-shell tank to ever leak at the site.
I knew it was serious because that's what my career has been for the last 25 years, is to monitor these tanks, to check for leaks. I mean, that's been what I've done.
Geffrey reported his findings to the top company guy in the field right away, WRPS manager Dave Strasser, who argued this wasn't serious, that rainwater, not nuclear waste, must have creeped into the space between the tank's inner and outer shells.
It was kind of just, we don't want to deal with it, Mike, you know, just let it go.
Shut up.
Just shut up, just let it go. Yeah, just don't worry about it.
But Geffrey did worry about it as warning after warning rolled in. A leak detection alarm went off. A few weeks later, an air monitor spiked to the highest reading of radioactivity ever seen by current employees. 5 months after that, equipment got stuck to the tank floor, an indicator it was glued to sticky waste.
I complained a lot about it. You know, I made a lot of statements of what are we going to do?
After all that, the employees here at Hanford came across the biggest red flag of all, something the experts say should have sent their managers scrambling to find answers. A broken wire, similar to this one behind the glass, was pulled out of the space between the shells. It gave off an extremely hot radiation reading, one that shocked the workers, but not the managers. They didn't call for more investigation. Instead, they kept to their rainwater theory.
It's hard to believe that you could get this much advance warning of a problem and not deal with it.
Marco Kaltofen is a top radiation expert located in Massachusetts. He's been to Hanford many times.
I really don't know what it's going to take. What is it going to take to get you to wake up and start dealing with a problem? Because problems do not fix themselves, and they definitely don't fix themselves in Hanford.
WRPS, the contractor hired by the feds to take care of all the tanks at Hanford, denied repeated requests for an on-camera interview, but they told us their experts disagree. They said contamination readings were well below what would have been expected from tank waste, and that the alleged red flags were investigated and determined unlikely to be caused by a leak. Months went by.
Yeah.
And what happened?
Well, nothing.
Geffrey says his WRPS bosses told him to conduct business as usual, but that didn't happen.
Yeah, I'd come home and be just frustrated and grumpy, couldn't sleep at nights.
He even considered ditching his long and successful career.
They took the fun out of it. This company took the fun out of my job. Just didn't enjoy it anymore. You know, it's hard to go to work and to fight so hard to do the right thing.
But Geffrey stayed on the job and was there to see this. Photos of not rainwater, but nuclear sludge oozing into the space. The pictures were taken during a routine inspection nearly a year after managers dismissed his first warnings.
What I was doing was right, you know, and it validated that I was doing the right thing by calibrating the stuff and sticking with it, and that it actually worked, and it detected the leak, and there was a leak there.
One of the reasons this whistleblower, Mike Geffrey, is so emotional is because he understands what's at stake, that it's a race against time. Do something about that leaking tank before the sludge makes its way into the groundwater and the Columbia River. So waiting, he believes, put them a year behind trying to work on a solution.
Tonight, the King 5 investigators exposed that Hanford executives misled public officials and citizens alike about leaking nuclear waste for several months last year. In her continuing investigation, Hanford's Dirty Secrets, Susannah Frame reveals the danger of an important tank at the site was concealed during meetings for the public and policymakers.
With all the uncertainties at Hanford, what's buried below this dirt was supposed to be the one slam dunk. 28 sturdy double shell tanks. If all else failed, at least these would protect the Columbia River, the food chain, and people from the worst of the worst on the planet. With 2 steel walls, not one like the older tanks, the added safety barrier would contain that nuclear waste until scientists figured out a way to get rid of it for good. But that plan fell apart.
The failure of a double shell tank is big, big news.
The citizen watchdog group Hanford Challenge shocked the public last summer with information from a Hanford insider. Their press release read, "First double shell tank leaks at Hanford." A massive blow to the entire cleanup operation.
And the reason is that we are relying on these tanks to operate safely for 40, 50 years through the rest of the cleanup.
Now the public wanted to know what's going on.
Board members and alternates,
Especially the 32 members of the Hanford Advisory Board, citizens, government officials, and scientists.
Secondly, another suggestion is
It's their job to give sound advice to the feds and the state of Washington on how to solve problems at the site.
But it seems like I'm getting quite mixed messages.
The board had questions, and Tom Fletcher, a U.S. Department of Energy Hanford manager, was supposed to be the man with the answers. At a board meeting last September, Fletcher brought photos of mysterious material that had made its way into that safety space between the 2 walls of the tank, known as AY-102. But Fletcher told the policy advisors he didn't know what it was yet.
They were saying, well, don't jump to conclusions, it's just a possible leak.
Meredith Crafton and Tom Carpenter of Hanford Challenge both attended the September meeting.
The overall presentation was we're looking, but we don't see any evidence yet.
Don't worry.
Don't worry.
Representative Jerry Paulette was there as well.
And their answer was, we're investigating it, but we think that it's likely that it's rainwater.
Here's an audio recording of a portion of Fletcher's presentation.
It could be a carbonate buildup.
yes.
And that's a possibility. It's just, like I said, we've seen a lot of different things, and they just don't point to any one thing, and that's why I'm really hard to speculate what it is. We haven't got to a point that says, hey, we know what it is. We know there is a history of rainwater leakage in this tank annulus.
We found those explanations don't add up. A month before that meeting, with all the speculation of rainwater, a tiny piece of duct tape, something similar to this, told a different story. This is duct tape employees from the government contractor in charge of the tanks, WRPS, lowered into the safety space of AY-102 to grab a sample of whatever was down there. And boy, did that tape deliver. Internal emails obtained by King 5 show that on August 13th, weeks before the board briefing, the lab reported to company execs what they'd found. Flakes of rust, old paint, and something else. Some of the most dangerous nuclear byproducts known to man, strontium-90, plutonium, cesium-137, and more. The exact components of AY-102's primary tank.
After they analyzed the duct tape, should there have been a lingering question, is the tank leaking or not?
Via Skype, we shared the findings with our radiation expert, Marco Kaltofen of Boston.
I don't know what they were waiting for. Did they need a fax from the president saying, okay, this is a leak? It was time. All the information was there to make the right decision.
Enough was on that tape.
Absolutely.
The tape held one more important clue. It was screaming hot with radioactivity. And remember, the sample came from the safety space that shouldn't record any contamination at all.
That's a huge number. You actually have to go out and look hard for equipment that can measure radiation that's that high. You had all the information you needed. You knew you had a leak. And now it was just time to fess up, face the music.
We wanted to ask WRPS President Mike Johnson about that and more. He repeatedly denied our request for an on-camera interview.
Hi, Mr. Johnson. I'm Susannah Frame from King TV. We talked on the phone before. We're here to talk about tank AY-102. Can you tell us why the public was misled for several months last year?
We caught up with Johnson outside the WRPS offices in Richland.
I think we have some important questions that our viewers deserve to have answered.
Johnson didn't answer our questions, but members of the Hanford Advisory Board did when we told them about the tape and lab results dated in August, a month before their briefing.
If they're going to say, just dismiss the evidence, the obvious evidence in front of them and not even tell us about that evidence, then how can we rely on them for anything?
And I think it can put the public at risk and workers at risk when they're not forthcoming with information, also meaning they're not forthcoming with responding to issues and creating solutions.
This was a very deliberate cover-up, and I will use the word that we were lied to. There's no two ways about it. We were lied to.
Tonight, the King 5 investigators follow the money trail in their continuing investigation, Hanford's Dirty Secrets.
During a time when Hanford workers are facing furloughs and layoffs, Susannah Frame exposes one of the government's prime contractors wasted millions on the broken tank at the center of our investigation.
This massive construction project will eventually be the last stop for nuclear sludge in Washington state, Hanford's waste treatment plant. The goal? Turn the dangerous liquids into glass logs at the plant, then ship it out of here for good. But now there's a major snag. Years ago, the feds chose one tank, AY-102, to serve as the first tank to ship waste to the treatment plant, a way to stage and feed millions of gallons of nuclear byproducts from underground holding tanks over to its final resting place. But that plan's now shot. With AY-102 confirmed to be leaking, it's deemed broken and unfit to handle the job.
How big of a setback is that?
Oh, it's huge.
Hanford worker Mike Geffrey discovered the leak in 2011, but the contractor he works for, WRPS, looked the other way for nearly a year and instead charged ahead with Plan A, spending money to ready AY-102 as their key tank waste feeder.
We wasted a year of designing, we wasted a year of where we could have been all of a sudden looking at another tank.
During the exact months WRPS discounted signs of the leak, the company spent millions on waste feed design work, equipment, and project management. Most of it wasted work hours and tax dollars.
We don't have a dime to waste at Hanford.
Teresa Labriola of the citizen group Columbia Riverkeeper has seen budgets shrink at Hanford for projects like cleaning up contaminated groundwater that's headed toward the river.
Again, this undermines the public's confidence in cleanup. When they hear about waste, they wonder what's going on at Hanford.
While leak evidence was ignored, how much did the Fed spend on a broken tank? The U.S. Department of Energy gives us this figure, $2.4 million. But we found that number's way off, 600% off. In a report obtained by King, written by their contractor, WRPS, the number's a whopping $14.2 million. $14 million for work, a lot of it already scrapped. Millions of that could have been saved if they'd listened to science and their own people when the first signs of a leak cropped up a year before all that spending.
Nothing added up that said this wasn't a problem. And they just chose not to do anything.
The right opportunities for those projects that exist that get funded.
At a public meeting in Richland, we caught up with federal Hanford official Tom Fletcher after we were denied requests to talk to him about the money and more.
I'm Susannah Frame from King TV, and we've been trying to get... Are you really not going to answer any of our questions?
We're actually on our way to another meeting right now, so like we told you before, give us a call, we'll talk to you.
We've asked actually for several months for the Department of Energy to give an interview.
We're very busy.
Mr. Fletcher, we just want a few minutes of your time since you are a very high-ranking official with the Department of Energy. Can you tell us why the Department of Energy has not been able to take 15 minutes to speak to King TV?
Actually, Susannah, again, give me a call when I'm not on.
I've called you, I've emailed, and we've been ignored, actually.
There's something else we hope to talk to the government about. King 5 has found that even after the leak was confirmed to the public last year, their contractor kept at it, spending on the defunct project. An assessment team wrote in a report that stopping the job should have been implied or evident. The Department of Energy sent their contractor 2 letters directing them to ramp down and pause the work and then to stop the design development altogether because this plan was no longer feasible.
It's alarming, it's concerning. We hear year after year about budgets shrinking.
Hanford Advisory Board member Dan Saris and others with the same goal, to clean up the most contaminated site in the country, say there's no time and no money to waste.
Every dime that's wasted is money that should be spent on successful cleanup operations. The cleanup is too big and too important to be wasting even a dime.